I hope you're ready for another podcasting session, Clay, because many times that's what creating internet content is. It's one vile fucking podcast after another. How are you?
Well, Wes, I have, in fact, hoped for this exact situation ever since you gave me that Indian head to hide, so...
I would hope you don't think our relationship is the Al and Johnny Burns relationship where I'm sipping a coffee and you're just telling me some nonsense about something. My favorite part of that is Al's sarcastic joke about not to tell Dan Doherty what they just talked about as he comes in loudly announcing it, and then Dan asks him what's going on, and he's too embarrassed, or he realizes he shouldn't say anything because Al told him not to, and he didn't get the joke.
Yeah, this might be the funniest episode so far.
Oh, really? That would be a funny contrast, just because it's also one of the saddest episodes, I think, so far.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah. I just thought generally it seemed like they were playing a lot of the scenes for the absurdism and humor.
Yeah. The frock coat thing, the running gag on his jacket.
Yeah. And like all the stuff with EB wanting to be the mayor and stuff. It's all very funny, it is a counterpoint to some pretty sad stuff too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the frock coat's a good example of that, right? It's like it has a lot of jokes, but it's also one of the more cutting insults in it, I think, when Jane is talking to Charlie when she has her head against the wall. And also, it also is a very guiding, important principle to make sure that no matter who you are, never look like E.B. Farnham when you're getting a hand job would be a good recommendation. Even if you're the mayor somewhere else.
I mean, is behind the piano the best place to do that?
So I guess we one thing before we get into it would just be kind of interesting. So it's been I wanted to touch base about before we started recording. We were talking about how we missed a week last week of recording this show, and it feels like sometimes it just feels like time flies, and you forget about what you've seen and like where you stand in the show and everything. What do you think about the pace we're watching Deadwood at? Like we're doing basically one episode a week. In an ideal world, is that too slow or is that just right? Like we're obviously going to be consuming it faster than it came out on TV, but we're still watching it at the pace that it would have aired on TV. Is that like are you finding that to be a positive experience, or do you think that you would deal better with watching it slower or faster? Do you have any thoughts?
No, I like the speed that we're doing it. Not only because that is the speed at which it was being put out, but also this show can be so dense that I think watching too many of them back to back, things would start to run together a little bit.
Yep.
And that's not to say that the stuff they're doing is bad or anything, but it's just like the way the dialogue can be so dense that I feel like it's better to have a little bit more time to digest what's going on.
Yeah, Amy's like, you guys are watching this too slowly, so she's like taking off ahead of me, and she was watching.
She should talk to Kyle. I feel like Kyle's been doing the same thing.
I know. Well, he's got like reams and reams of Voyager notes or whatever, but so she was watching an episode ahead, and as I was watching this episode, I was just thinking in my head, I was like, oh no, I hope I don't bring up any points that happen in the later episode, because it is kind of hard to distinguish where they start and stop sometimes if you've watched them too closely together. So I'm happy with the pace.
I actually did when I started this one, I thought that I had maybe started the wrong episode because the opening scene just felt really familiar to me, like I had already seen it. And I don't know if maybe that meant the last time I watched it, it started to play automatically or something, but it was something about Al getting up and taking a piss in his own bedroom into a commode or whatever was surprisingly familiar to me.
They've had a lot of scenes of him getting out of bed with Trixie too, so it's
that's probably what it is.
That usually ends and starts the next episode. It's the way that they bookend things. So, all right, we're going to talk about No Other Sons or Daughters right after we play the music.
You're listening to a podcast that is a lie agreed upon. Join Wes and Clay as they discuss HBO's Deadwood and tell you something pretty.
This is No Other Sons or Daughters, directed by Ed Bianchi, written by George Putnam, In this episode, the United States government is poised to make an agreement with the Indians to annex the Black Hills, Deadwood included. A magistrate comes to town. An arrest warrant has appeared in Yankton accusing Swearengen of a murder in Chicago. The Reverend Smith's health deteriorates. He imagines that his body is emitting an odor of decay. Joanie decides to take Tolliver up on his offer. Swearengen assembles Deadwood's town leaders. We're forming structure enough to convince those territorial fucks in Yankton that we're worthy enough to pay them their fucking bribes, he says. Farnham requests the position of mayor. In the absence of any objections, he is given the title. Star goes to the gem to see Trixie. Cochran examines the Reverend, who attributes his physical and mental problems to the will of God. Jane decides it's time to ride out of town. The direction of this camp makes me fucking sick. Bullock tells Alma that he has a wife and a son in Michigan and that he has written them to come join him. So,
but he doesn't really care about him. He just wants to make that clear. I'm telling you that I have a wife and child, but also giving you details to let you know that I'm fully well ready to cheat on them.
Yeah, I was going to say they're not blood relations, but I would hope that in one case it's certainly not a blood relationship. But yeah, he explains the situation in a way that they can both understand what exactly the situation is, or the type of thing that type of thing might be, or whatever Charlie Utter says when he's talking to Joanie. Yeah, so this is No Other Sons or Daughters. I really like this episode, although it's slower than a lot of the other episodes, I think. It's an episode built, like a lot of them are, it's about scenes of characters interacting with each other, but it's not a action-packed Swearengen yelling at Bullock type scenes that you get out of this. It's a lot more sedate than that. And in my opinion, the episode is really just about like dealing with change and then dealing with the change and trying to figure out your new roles in this changing universe that you're walking into. So a lot of people are trying to suss out where they belong in this episode, whether they belong in the camp, where they belong in relation to everybody else. And then, of course, they have the literalizing scene of it where everyone has to decide what kind of role they want to make in the town government. And that goes accordingly without all the characters. But what'd you think of it?
Well, I think that summary left off an important thing, I think, unless I missed it, which is the doctor has been arrested for grave robbing 7 times. 7 times,
yep. It was a difficult time to be a doctor to figure out what was going on in your head.
It's true.
Yeah.
I really like this one. I think it was necessary, and I didn't find it to feel too slow, mainly because one of the things that I felt about the previous chunk of episodes was that they were hustling through stuff so quickly.
Yeah,
like they were doing all this big plot stuff with Kristen Bell's character and the plague and the gold claim and all this kind of stuff. It's moving very fast. The killing of Wild Bill. It was just going through so much stuff so quickly that it was nice to have an episode like this where it was sort of a reactionary episode where people can kind of take a breath and take stock of what's been going on and where things are going.
Yeah. Yeah. It felt more personal in some level. I feel like a lot of the conversations were more personal than the business-oriented stuff that has been happening in previous episodes. And that's kind of been a theme that's been continuing. Like, I'm thinking of Saul and Trixie have that sort of like that scene where he goes up to her at the gym and says that she can come to his shop anytime that she wants to. Mm-hmm. The characters have
some hot foreplay.
Yes.
Dialogue there when she's like, I'm going to buy an axe, a shovel, and a length of rope. And he's like, baby, I am not going to ask you what you're using that stuff for.
Don't ask.
But it's there when you want it.
for fair pricing.
For a fair price.
And just come on over to Bullock and Starr's Hardware Depository.
Evening.
Evening.
I've wondered how things were with you. And Mrs. Garret. And the child?
I expect they're well. Now she struck lucky at her claim.
And how are you, Trixie?
As you see. Earning the greasy eye from my boss for idle chatter.
Can I buy you a drink?
I'd rather you didn't. isn't the place for you.
So you say.
If you insist on my embarrassing myself, have it not where I'd want you to see me.
Come see me then.
He doesn't permit her making calls out.
Come to our store. Come buy a broom.
I don't want what I can't have, Mr. Starr.
All right.
If I did come, I'd buy an axe, a hammer, and a saw.
All fully stocked. And we never ask the purpose of a customer's purchase.
And it's like you were saying, they balance it's balancing the comedy and the sort of tragedy well. And this one is, to me, is the like a lot of the characters are falling apart as others are. Like, it basically has to do with the change that's happening into the camp is having both positive and negative effects for everybody. I think that Al kind of personally epitomizes both aspects of that, which is that he wants the annexation to happen, but is worried about how it's going to go. And he spends this episode the most nervous he's ever been, I think, out of everything we've seen. He's walking around. He drinks like 25 cups of coffee, he says, as he's walking around. He's trying to hustle everybody up to get to this meeting where they can discuss what they need to do to pay off the bribes. And his great opening scene with Trixie is neat too, just because they're playing off of that the Trixie and Al relationship, and he's just explaining that, you know, he's trying to kind of talk himself into that the things that are happening are for the good of everybody, and he's just being hopeful that this is going to work out for everybody in the long run.
Yeah. He's also, I still feel like they're really softening him up quite a bit. I have to imagine it has something to do with the fact that Ian McShane is just so charismatic and enjoyable to watch that they're like, I don't know if we can make this guy be as bad as we wanted him to be, because it's tough to like that if he's just an awful person. It seems to me as though Al's getting a little softer, and at least in the way that they're presenting him, while Cy is getting a lot harder.
Yeah, and
I mean, I guess you could take that as just the evolution of the show and the sort of counterpoint thing that they've done consistently up to this point.
Yeah. Cy can't adapt is what the show seems to be saying, whereas Swearengen is much better at being a chameleon to what the situation needs. And, you know, it comes down to their character in terms of running the political offices that they have to put together for these bribes. Swearengen throws the whole thing together, and Cy doesn't do anything, which a couple characters point out, that he takes no position and he does nothing, just sort of he wants to reap the benefits but is not willing to put in the time for it. And I think that they represent those two. Besides the fact that it's McShane playing Al and he comes across as a softer actor, it is just like, now that they've got Cy there, it's easier to split the two apart and to show them the opposite trajectories that the two characters are going off onto.
Yeah. The one thing I was kind of confused at is, why does he get so mad at Eddie for speaking up during the meeting? Oh, I know what I was going to say. I find it interesting that they are showing these characters to be sort of not what Al... they're showing Cy to not be the long-term thinker, really, that Al thinks that he is.
Right.
Because in that early episode, when Cy shows up and he says he's got another plot down the street or whatever, Al's very complimentary and like, okay, this guy's thinking fourth dimensionally. When it seems like he is to an extent, but it's still really short-sighted thinking, because he's really only thinking as far as the money he's pulling in at that moment. He's not really thinking about the big picture, whereas Al is definitely thinking about the big picture. But I still, why does Cy get angry at Eddie for speaking up at the meeting?
Well, couldn't our informal organization levy taxes on the settlement to pay the bribes? Say, to licensed businesses, wouldn't that spread the burden?
Will women who pay the license fees have the same right to operate brothels as men?
Because Eddie brings up the idea of, are women business owners basically going to get the same rights that male business owners are going to get, as a way to sort of like help his friend Joanie. Cy gets mad at him mostly because it's in the context of here, it's an extremely progressive thing to say. But Cy gets extremely annoyed because he has that scene later where he starts talking about when Joanie comes back and he's been drinking, and he talks about how they were on the right path, and then everyone that he came to Deadwood with has decided to do their own thing, and it's making him angry. So Eddie saying that is something that flies in the face of what Cy wants to do, which is that Cy's very rigid about. It's what you were saying, like he's buying property, but he doesn't see the big picture. He's just trying to maximize revenue that he can get.
Right. Yeah.
So he's being upset by everyone going around and sort of having different opinions about the way things should be other than the opinion that he has, and he thinks that his opinion is right, obviously.
Hi, Cy.
I was afraid I lost you to the heathens.
How's that meeting?
All right. Not organizing for annexation until Eddie cracked his fucking mouth.
What it turned to then?
Joint like ours, Joanie, what are we selling? Walk through this door. It's a new start. Come on in, try your luck here. Of course, we know the percentages being the percentages. You play long enough, your luck ain't gonna get no better here than anywhere else. Maybe it's because we're in a brand new camp. Since we arrived, certain people that are near and dear to me seem to have bought into our own fucking line, and now they're trying to get me to go along. But I can't. See, Joanie? Because I'm a big boy. Now I'm ready for Eddie and me to have a little chat.
And he has all these different opinions, but he's not actually doing anything. Like, I think it's probably partially, a little bit of insecurity in the fact that he has opinions about what everybody else is doing, but what he's actually doing is nothing.
He's very he's controlling, and I guess he would like it's sort of I don't know if you call it low self-esteem, but he's desperate to control everybody that's around him, and he's insecure. He's too insecure to be able to manage people doing what they want to do or deal with different ideas in the way that Al deals with ideas a little bit better than Cy does. Cy's very rigid, and his rigidity causes his violence to come out when people don't do what he wants.
I find the juxtaposition of these two characters like endlessly interesting, because he is so rigid and so controlling in a way that feels similar to Al, but Al's really more of a if someone were to come up to Cy, if one of his guys were to come up with Cy and say, I'm thinking about doing this is what I want to do, he would pull out the knives and tell them all the reasons why they can't do it, and why they need to do what he says. And if the similar person went up to Al, Al's answer would be, I don't give a shit, do what the fuck you want.
Right.
But he would still have the string, hold of the string, but he is definitely a lot more, at least creates the illusion of independence at the gym.
Yeah, he's open to, if not outright independence, he's sort of open to suggestions from the others. Like obviously in this one, he gives Johnny Burns more responsibility. Even like Cy would not give Burns more responsibility through that sequence. Cy would probably think that Burns is an idiot, but he would not eventually end up giving him the role that he's trying to work himself into.
Utter freight and postal delivery service. That's what happens when you drop a fucking stitch.
What stitch did I drop?
I did. This freight and delivery service should be opened by Persimmon Phil as a cover for his other fucking activities.
He's dead.
I know he's dead now.
Well, if you don't know, nobody does.
I should have brought in a replacement, is my fucking point.
Well, you'll know better next time.
The direction of my thoughts, with the sustained fucking stupidity that you're exhibiting, I hesitate to voice them, is that you might want to train for Phil's former position.
Al, I have hoped for this conversation ever since you give me that Indian head to hide.
Cy just gets nasty. He has the ending sequence where he accuses Eddie of being a pedophile. I mean, it's assumed that Eddie's homosexual, but Cy's sort of at least just insulting him by saying he's a pedophile. And he just Eddie has the great final line of just being like, I wish you had taken one of those positions in the town just so you'd have less time to be an evil cocksucker or whatever he calls him. But
Eddie Sawyer.
Can we keep this short?
Sure, Eddie. Maybe he finds you a 12-year-old farm boy to have some fun with. That's short enough for you?
I never did that, and you know it.
All this crap about what is and isn't natural. Whatever does it for a fellas, what does it? Ain't that right?
I never did that.
But did you ever want to unbutton some farm boy's tentons and get yourself some relaxation? That's what I'm asking you. Take that boy you spoke up for up in Joanie's room the other day.
I spoke up for not torturing that boy.
For what you spoke for and what you would have wanted to do if it was just you and that corn-fed in that room alone is what I'm inquiring about the difference between.
Dry hole, Si.
Ah, you can work that out. You just use some spit on that or lard. 17 fucking years, and I never saw a look on your face like I saw up there in that room the other day, including when I had to smack some girl around.
I was never in a room with you before where you was gonna kill somebody.
Now, I do not make judgments. I gave that up a long time ago. All I want is for us to get along better, Eddie, so every time you open your mouth in public, I don't have to worry about what the fuck's gonna come out. So let me get you some fucking kid to fuck in the ass of the mouth or suck his prick or let him fuck you.
Fuck you, Si. Fuck you.
Now, that's where I draw the line. Friend or no friend, or us want to get along better or not. I want you to go up into Joanie's room, which I gather she don't want to go into no more. I want you to go up there and think this thing through. Imagine yourself up there with that boy, and like you were the other day, only this time it's just him and you. And I want you to figure out what it is that you want. Because next time we see each other, I want you clear-headed, Eddie, and understanding yourself. The old Eddie that knows the percentages and how to play them, and whatever a man does away from the table is his own fucking business. I want you cheerful and ready to help me with my work. I don't want you coming the fuck out. You finish your shift, and you go up there to Joanie's room. You think things through. All right, Eddie Sawyer. Do we understand each other?
Why don't you volunteer for something in that meeting? Why didn't you put your hand up? Could have kept you from being such an evil cocksucker.
Yeah, I still think some of the best character writing they've done to show you the kind of person that Al is from the last episode where he has the kid comes up and asks him if he can take the day off to go look for his father, and his response is, even if I said no, I'd hope you'd do it and then find another place to work because obviously you'd be fired.
Right.
But it's like that's the kind of person he is, which is almost, it's honorable to the point that he's a dishonorable guy, if that makes sense. Like there's something weirdly honorable about his dishonesty.
Yeah, he has the I wouldn't trust somebody who didn't try to steal a little ethos.
Right. Yeah.
Al's I really liked his performance here. Just how stressed out he is when he's like banging around. And he yells at Merrick. He's like, "Where the fuck have you been?"
Are they trying to set up there's something funky going on with Merrick?
No, I think he was just out getting supplies. I think Al's just nervous about it.
I vaguely remember Merrick ending up as like an opium addict or something.
Really?
I'm going to assume that doesn't happen, but for some reason, I can't remember.
No spoilers. But he doesn't get the he was about to open his mouth to take the mayor job, at least from EB, but he didn't open his mouth in time, and then he has the sequence where he's it seems like he's plotting a little because there's the scene where he's at the bar drinking alone and it sounds like he's talking to somebody, but the camera pans and he's not talking to anybody. He's just talking about how he values the Fourth Estate so highly that he wouldn't allow himself to take a governmental role that would not allow him to run the paper and stuff like that.
I like that. That was a good scene.
He has a pretty good throwaway joke too about when Charlie Utter comes into the meeting and he announces his shop, and then Merrick just has a line where he's like, and he ran a fantastic ad in today's Pioneer. So check that out.
Yeah. I also really liked the Charlie Utter and Joanie scene at the end where she mentions the meeting, and obviously he had no idea about it. And he's like, yes, of course.
Right.
I like to be late for things like that. And she's like, yeah, well, it's crazy that, it's at the Gem.
Yeah.
Because of this. And he's like, yep. That's exactly why I think it's there as well.
That's such a great scene for her.
Really
it just shows how much they like each other, where she lets him down gently and doesn't try to embarrass him by not knowing that or realizing that he wasn't invited, obviously. Yeah, it's a Charlie Utter is an interesting character. Callie's performance is really good, but he mixes well with a lot of the other characters, and he's like a great relaxing force for most of the characters, except for Jane when she's at her worst. But he's able to ingratiate himself with a lot of the other characters, even if they're all from different backgrounds, and find some kind of connection with them, and it leads to good scenes between him and everybody else.
Yeah, he's so good, and it's this is mean to say, but he's got a face that looks like it's made out of dirt. Like, he looks like he's Clayface, the Batman villain, stuck between transitions or something, because he's got like the top of his head looks human, but then as it goes down into his neck, it gets like darker and grainier and like dirtier and kind of like hair, and he's got pock marks and stuff. And he's just not a conventionally attractive man. Yeah, but he's that really adds so much to the character and what they're doing with him. And I don't know. It's nice to see an actor who looks different. You know, he's not the Elephant Man or anything, but he's not
Oliphant or anything like that.
Right. But who of us are?
Who can be? There should be more. No, I love his performance. I think he's I think he just pairs well with every other character. And he talks to a lot of characters in this one. He talks to Jane. He talks to Seth. He has a scene at the gym. He talks to somebody else. He has one other scene that pops out about Joanie and everything like that. But he's nice.
He's not an idiot and he's not naive, but he's got sort of a innocence about him.
Yep.
You know, especially in a scene like this where he's clearly out of his depth, and he's not out of his depth in that he's going to fail, but that he's doing something new. Yeah. And he just the way that he sort of almost like a puppy dog has this conversation with Joanie is just so endearing.
Yeah.
This show's great. Every character in the show is a home run.
Yeah, and even additionally to the characters, I just like the where I mentioned it before, but we like the other shows we do are like Star Trek, Picard, and stuff like that, right? And it's like I'm really struck by the number of scenes in this show that are the text and the subtext are different from each other in like numerous scenes. So it's like there's never just a character having a scene where they just literally like explain some information to somebody else. There's always either there's a reason that they're telling the information, or there's a subtext to another story that the character is involved in that is being realized through the conversation that they're having with the other characters. So like the Charlie Utter and Joanie thing is a good example because they're both out there sort of unsure about what they're doing, what they're looking for. And their conversation builds on that.
You off someplace? You need an escort or the like?
No, I'm more or less just walking around.
What do you think of this frock coat?
Very well fitted.
I had it made up in Cheyenne. I'm one for a good appearance and all, but it's a little out of my path.
If you'd have made me guess, I would have said it's not your usual garb.
And I'm a considerable hand at the freight business, but as far as leasing this building, before knowing what the traffic's going to bear, I don't know what possessed me. See, I do well in a camp or a settlement or a township, but that don't make me a camp or a settlement or a township type. This is the attire for that type of type.
He's not going. He's he's explaining sort of like how he feels, and he sort of realizes that Joanie feels the same way, and he doesn't ask her how she's feeling. He just explains how he's feeling, and through her realizing that they're both going through the same thing, they have this bonding session going on.
Yeah.
But there's not this incredibly obvious thing of Charlie's like, well, I know what your problem is you can get a lease and buy a house or something. It's much more subtle than that, and a lot of the scenes build off of that stuff. Like when Jane is yelling at the doc. It's hard to. The Jane character is a very difficult character to write because she's so unlikable when she's at her worst in these cases.
But they keep finding ways to make her likable. Like the fact that the doctor walking by her while she's standing up asleep, leaning against the wall with her face, is one of the funniest things I've seen in the show. It's so good. And like the conversation that they have after that is very tense and angry, but just the lead into it is so goofy. Yeah. And even like the stuff with the Reverend too, where he's going through something serious and depressing. He's talking about not only is he's lost the use of the entire left side of his body, it seems, but he's going through a crisis of faith. Yeah. And what they couch that in him asking if she smells anything, and she automatically is like, what, are you trying to accuse me of drinking again? Are you trying to assume that maybe I have a casual drink when I get off work, which I definitely don't do? Yeah. It's so good. It's so clever.
I'm headed for the gym.
Hooray for you.
Reverend is laid down trying to hide another seizure.
Ain't you clever to see through this subterfuge?
I've been letting it go. But if the idea is for you to drink more and more till I say something, I am hereby officially saying I wish you would stop fucking drinking.
I have no fucking ideas as far as you saying one fucking thing about anything I do or don't. As far as drinking, or where I stand or nap, or any other fucking thing concerning me. Or go, or leave, or don't, or win.
Right, Jane.
So you can go fuck yourself, and don't try and hasten anyone anywhere, because everyone follows their own fucking pace, and don't try and fucking hasten them. If you happen to be fucking overlooking that you think it's just one day after another with the same fucking seizure as if it happened a week before, and that just shows how much you fucking know and what you pay attention to. God damn you!
I like the dock scene with Jane just because he, when he's sort of opening his heart to her, just saying like, I wish you didn't drink. Like, and the whole thing has been like, people are trying to save Jane. Charlie's offering her jobs, which happens afterwards, and she doesn't take it. But Doc wants her to, be the nurse that he knew she can be and to help the town. He wants her to stop drinking. And she just cuts back at him in the way that drives the later action where he talks to the Reverend about it, because she has the line saying like, who the fuck are you saying that the doctor's having a seizure now and how different it is from last week? She's basically accusing him of not paying attention to how sick the Reverend is at that point. Yeah. And so it hurts him. And she also lashes out at, because the frock coat thing had been a running joke up to that point, when Charlie offers her the jobs in the at his mail route and is trying to help her, her final line to him is just like, she's never seen him dressed so awfully. And it's like, it's hitting him right at his most insecure thing, because he's obviously very concerned about how the jacket makes him look and like how he's settling into this new role. And I don't know, Jane is a tough character to play and to write, just because you can't have her be too unlikable, but you can't have her be too slapsticky, at the same time, or even like you shouldn't feel too bad for her either. I don't think like she kind of has to walk this line of being an asshole but being a likable asshole at the same time.
Yeah, there's with her there's a certain element of being amused by how over the top she is and how defensive and antagonistic she can be.
Yeah.
But it's at the base of it, you're always kind of rooting for her. And so I think because you can see that she's not just a character who's being shitty for the sake of being shitty. She's clearly troubled.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes her so such a great character. I think we've said this before. It's because she's not just there for comedic or antagonistic effect. Like it is rooted in trauma and insecurity and all this other stuff that comes out through the way that she acts, but they never really talk about specifically.
Yeah.
And in this one, I think they position her really well in the conversation that she has with Charlie, because it's basically they kind of sum up through her struggle to stop drinking, her inability to really move on and go on with her life.
Yeah.
And so ultimately she realizes that in order to do that, she can't do it here. And you have these two characters who are kind of similar because they obviously came in, they're part of the same group or whatever. And Charlie is choosing one path and she's choosing the other path.
Yeah. Yeah. She has that line about she can't drink where he is, referencing Bill, and she can't not drink anywhere else. Something like that, which is kind of sticks to where she is. The other scene, besides the fact that she yells at Doc, I think is very effective, is when she's working in the pest tent and the Reverend comes in to take his shift from her, and he's been hiding his sickness from Cochran, and she gets upset with him. That's where he makes the comment about his smell, and she insinuates that he thinks that she's been drinking, but she's very. She does that balancing act again. She's very cruel to him, right? But at the same time, she's also sort of giving him a motivational speak to, like, you have to tell the doc that you don't feel well and, like, deal with this. But, like, there's that sort of, it just ends it with, like, the tragedy of, like, he tries to pick up the cleaning water and has sort of like a minor seizure and falls down with it. And she's like, you spilt my fucking cleaning water. And then she slaps him on the shoulder and says, I'm off and you're on right now. And then just immediately steps out. And her first step out of the tent, she pulls a flask out and starts drinking. It's a well done balancing act between, you can't play that scene where she's too awful to the Reverend. Like, she can't have no point in being mad at him.
Right.
And they just balance it well with, like, she's being unreasonable, but she's pointing out an unreasonable trait in another character at the same time.
Yeah, I think the show is just really great at people getting angry about stuff that isn't the thing they're actively being angry about.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, there's so much subtext to everything that's going on. Her getting mad at the Reverend is not just her getting mad at the Reverend. She's mad at herself in her own situation, and she's taking it out on him, as well as being mad that he's not helping himself as much as she's not helping herself.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's really well done. It's a good show.
I continue to really like the Reverend. It has one of my own, when Cochran finally gets to examine him, and he says that the word of God no longer moves him, and he's suffering, but this must be God's will. Cochran sums up my own personal view on the idea of, like, a divine creator God, which is that if this is his will, then he must be a real son of a bitch. I like that. It's another example of Cochran sort of cutting through what the other characters think with his own vision of the world and sort of applying it to them. But I think Amy was asking me on this rewatch, like, what characters do I think have changed? My opinion has changed the most, and I think the Reverend is one of them. He the first couple times I watched the show, I don't think I really appreciated his. It's sort of hard to track what the Reverend is intentionally doing and what he's not doing, and what he's doing on purpose and what he's sort of accidentally falling into at the same time. So when he talks to other characters and he sort of pinpoints what their flaw is or how they can be helpful to things, like when he talks to Bullock, it's unclear about whether, I think Kyle was mentioning on the Discord, like how intentional he is about this stuff. But even if he's not intentional, his belief in the faith, his belief in the faith in what he's saying and what he believes is the right thing to do is touching. And of course, he's the one who's getting the most ill from this brain tumor that's slowly killing him and making him believe that he's already dead because he thinks that he smells like a corpse and stuff like that. So it's very sad. But he's such a different character from all the rest of them because the rest of them have almost no religiosity to them. So he's very distinct in that way. And I think that he just has interesting things to say. And Cochran interacting with him is always excellent.
Yeah, he evolution of his character is interesting to me because he's set up as this, like you're saying, he believes everything that he says, and he's set up as this sort of voice of conscience through his sermons and stuff, and now that's wearing away on him, and he has to kind of face up to the reality of the situation that he's in.
Yeah,
and I think pairing him with the doctor is a good foil for him.
He's the opposite of what you were saying in that the characters get angry at stuff that is not what they're angry about. He refuses to get angry at God for putting him in this position. You know,
right?
He's not the one. The Reverend is almost like he's almost impossible to get. We've never seen him get angry, right? Like he's just impossible to be angry, even if he's in this kind of situation. And he refuses to blame others as he easily could in the condition that he's in.
You know, it's the same at the same time too. It's in this scene, he's not angry, but he's also just not helping himself,
right,
which is obviously what the doctor is trying to get across to him. He's no good to anybody if he doesn't help himself. And it is an interesting way to have him play that out because putting him in a situation where he can affect his own life, but he doesn't.
Yep.
Because honestly, I don't know. I mean, it makes me wonder if he actually believes what he's saying there, that this is God's will, so he's just going to let it happen. I don't know if I totally believe that. Like
in what sense? Because I guess that I would say that it is because he's what I think Milch is doing with this with the Reverend is that Milch seems to have a stronger belief and sort of agrees with characters like Swearengen, who are people who sort of take the bumps and then roll with them and adapt them to something that they want. And the commentary on the Reverend is that just believing that things are God's will and not fighting back against it is sort of giving up in the face of the punishment that comes for you.
Yeah,
it's a positive way of looking at it, but Cochran, I think, represents the pushback against that of like, it's the don't go quietly into that dark night type thing.
Right.
You know, it's like you rage against the dying of the light or whatever.
Man, I'll tell you, I did not go quietly into the dark night. I was so psyched to see that, and I came out just as psyched as when I went in. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't disagree with any of that, but there's something about that scene where juxtaposing what he's saying about it being God's will with the fact that he says he doesn't get the same, he doesn't
move him the same way.
Yeah. He doesn't. The God's word doesn't move him the same way. Feels to me like there's something else going on in there that maybe him not taking action is sort of covering up. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but I find him to be continue to be a fascinating character in how they're portraying him.
Yeah, I see him as just the word of God not moving him anymore. He lumps in with that is God's will, and like he mentions to Cochran that he's not suffering from pain. It's just the fact that God has cut him out from his life. Basically, that's where his true pain comes from. He's being it ties back into the Reverend's been preaching about the body, about how the different parts of the body come together as one whole. He's being cut out from, I'm not religious, but like the body of Christ essentially has been he's been removed from that.
Yeah, I guess kind of what I'm thinking is that, do you think that he would act differently if he was in the same situation, but the word of God did continue to move him? Do you think is his acquiescing to God's will, quote unquote, his way of trying to force his way back into the good graces as he might understand it? You know what I mean?
Oh, I see. So would he be, I think if he was still moved by the word, I think that he would be a happier character dying the same way.
Okay.
So you would feel he would be different, because I would just see him to be he would embrace his impending death more happily, because he knows that where he's going is the thing that he wants to die for.
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't have an answer to this. I'm just thinking about it because it is such a change for him.
Yeah. And I mean, how much of it is just the plot of his tumor, right? That he's not the same person that he was.
They should do that thing where he just all of a sudden can speak Mandarin or something.
Yes.
One of those tumors.
Just talking to Wu in the background of every single scene.
He shows up with an Australian accent. I'm like, what happened? I don't know. I never talked like this before.
It's a different actor.
Not till me noggin got bonked.
There's a lot of bonked noggins going on. Jane has a funny line about his eye.
You know who would have been great on this show? Bob Hoskins.
Yeah.
He would have been.
He'd be a minor.
Spectacular on this show.
They have Brian Cox in the third season. He's not quite the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish you hadn't told me that.
No.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Had some good Brian Cox action on the Rotten Horror Picture Show. This
what movie?
Past week. The Ring. He plays Samara's
dad. That's right. He
Ring.
does. Yeah, like on the videotapes, right? Or did you actually meet him?
No, you actually meet him, and then he takes a bath covered in electrical wires and kills himself.
Yeah. So say we all. I guess the only just looking through the scene descriptions here. I mean, it's really just the other binding thing that we talked a little bit is Seth and Alma have their bonding session, and Seth reveals his family that is coming in and what the relationship with them and everything like that is.
May I ask why you spoke of your brother?
My wife was his widow. My boy's their child.
I see.
Ellsworth meets with Alma and agrees to work on her claim, which is nice, and he bonds with Sophia. So the Garret claim is going to be able to stay there, and she'll keep her hands on it. And as the magistrate Claggett says, that you have to, whatever land or property you've been working on when the annexation comes will become yours. So she has to stay there for a bit. Claggett in the town, I think, are the last bit to talk about. I love the scene with Claggett and Al. I think that's terrific. The show itself... The show itself operates in a kind of a similar position as The Wire, which is that it likes everything until institutions become or culture becomes institutionalized, and then it thinks that at that point something breaks within it. Merrick is a good example of the newspaper type stuff in the Fourth Estate. Claggett is a great example of like the government that's coming for them is not a great savior to Deadwood. It's a necessary evil that they have to deal with, and they have to pay bribes. And it's a corrupt U.S. government that's coming in to sort of like basically act like the mafia and take what they can and allow people to have what little remains at the end of it. But Al's trying to negotiate that with Claggett, who is just a wonderful bureaucrat who says a bunch of flowery nonsense, but ultimately just comes down to, I need $5,000 from you.
But what complicates the situation is that the hills were deeded to the Sioux by the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty.
This could mean that the land occupied by the camp doesn't fall under any statutory definition of unclaimed or unincorporated.
So who needs to get paid?
Signs of conciliation and willingness would weigh in the camp's favor. But just as important is the presence of a ad hoc municipal organization that would enable the legislature to say, Deadwood exists. We don't have to create it. It would be disruptive if we did. The community's already organized, not legally maybe, but certainly informally. Why not let's give this informal organization the blessing of legal standing?
What's the right fucking number for the legislature?
There's a lot of gold out here, Al. To define right in this environment is very liable to be an ongoing process. What I'm prepared to do is make a list of names and a preliminary guess at some numbers.
Yeah, I really like that scene too, where he keeps trying to be flowery about it, and Al's just like, just tell me who I need to pay.
I don't need the one hand and the other hand isn't any of this kind of shit.
Yeah, it's another thing, a difference between Al and Cy, because I think Al is a good politician. Yeah, I don't think Cy understands. But well, he might understand it, but I don't think he's good at it.
No.
Like I can easily see Al hanging on by his fingernails to end up as the person who is legally in charge of Deadwood.
Yep.
Once the government comes, and I think Cy would be long gone before that happens.
No, I mean, has Cy ever had a conversation where someone disagrees with him and he doesn't get that angry Powers Booth who's like, this guy's a piece of trash.
do that nice Powers Booth, like lower the head and turn towards the camera thing.
He strokes his mustache.
What did you say to me?
that's every Cy Tolliver thing. He doesn't handle adversity well. Obviously the adversity he dealt with Miles and Flora in the last episode resulted in their immediate death at that point. Mm-hmm. So we get reminded of that because we see the dress in Wu's pig pen. Al's just
remember that scene where Joanie freaks out because she's never seen Asian people before? I know that's not exactly what it was, but
doesn't leave the house. Like. She's in a man's world out there, and it's scary to find a place to rent. That's not the area you'd want to open your brothel, I don't think.
No, probably not.
Al's a better politician. Claggett is. I like Claggett's final line just strikes me as funny. He's like, I'm going to continue writing now, if you don't mind. He keeps writing down the names and the bribes. But that all culminates in the town gets assembled, or the pillars of the community are assembled to take their ad hoc positions.
Man, I love the Latin stuff in this show. Is hilarious.
Which I always read that scene as just, Milch's Claggett is the bureaucracy that's coming, and the town stuff in the meeting is just a satire of like either meetings in general or just the sort of like nonsense of political appointments in some way. Mm-hmm. Al can't run the meeting without Dan coming in talking about the piano and stuff like that. It's all very good. It's a very funny and also very cutting in terms of, sometimes the politician that wins the highest role of mayor is just the only person who raises their hand and no one else says them to shut the fuck up.
I can't believe nobody said, maybe not this fucking guy. But it's like, that's one of those things that's so funny about it, because nobody opposes it, but everyone's like, well, this is just temporary.
Bullock's line after he gets appointed mayor is that, he says like, these are temporary positions on a temporary position time basis that we're soon going to be get rid of. But yeah, no one raises their hand to fight off EB, who is Sanderson is just endlessly charming as someone who takes a lot of pride in these fake roles that they're making up.
He's so good.
What's that got to do with the price of fish?
Our proper order of fucking business is to make titles and departments before the territorial cocksuckers sending their cousins to rob and steal from us.
Well, who fills the various positions?
Pick the names from a fucking hat as far as I'm concerned.
I'd like to be mayor.
Objections? Mayor.
Wouldn't a good use for an informal organization with temporary appointees be providing a few services to the camp?
Mayor?
Well, provide a few services and use a lion's share of revenues to pay the bribes.
And he kind of, I believe it's him that says this, which is sort of the cherry on the satire, which is when he says taking people's money is what makes an organization official.
Yes.
It's like it doesn't matter what the hell it is. Once you start taking people's money, then it becomes an official body.
Yep.
Which is kind of pretty much.
Well, even in their ad hoc, on a whim fake government that they're forming, right? They immediately pass the buck to tax other people instead of paying for it. The solution they come up with is that they have to levy taxes and to pay the bribes that are going to be coming in. It's just it's just a very cutting take on like the community that's forming. Deadwood just seems to distinguish itself between there's a community aspect, and then once things become institutionalized and you actually have government and other agencies building up around it, the grift just automatically follows that development. And it's impossible to, there's no, I don't think Milch believes in like a world of like communism basically, which is that like there is no sort of government and that everyone can just live in the camp the way that they were when they got there and things will develop swimmingly. There's more, it has that wire outlook of like things are coming that are going to change the characters and act on the characters, and it's not always good.
Yeah. And I mean, even more so than a satire, I do think that line is correct. It's actually very smart, because what they're doing there is they're trying to bring a government to an area that as such has had no government whatsoever. And if they just decide tomorrow, they go out and say, okay, now EB is the mayor, and then you got to listen to us from now on. Everybody tell them to go fuck themselves.
Right.
But the minute that they have to pay taxes, it becomes a legitimate government, even if it's really not. It's like, how they when you're budgeting or giving someone a quote for something, at least when I do it, one of the things that people say is, don't be afraid to ask for more, because if you ask for less, people like respect you less.
Yeah.
Where it's like they're expecting this is going to cost money, and so if you come in way under what they're expecting, they're like, oh well, this guy isn't serious.
Right.
So if you go, and so it is funny how that stuff really, all it takes is if you ask for a price that seems like a professional price, they're like, oh, this guy's legit, he's a professional.
This is a weird tangent, but there was just I was watching a YouTube video that was kind of talking about that, and he brought up an interesting point that I'm going to butcher here because I can't remember the specifics of it, but it was a guy giving a course about like business negotiation or something like that, and just arguing about a per hour rate, right? Which is that it's hard to there's the schism between a per hour rate is kind of bad for people, because wouldn't you want to reward me if I could do this in 1 hour as opposed to saying this is going to take me 10 hours? Why shouldn't you pay me the amount that basically you're paying for the value of the thing? So why does the amount of time matter? If I get it to you quickly, you should value it more because I did it efficiently and I got you exactly what you wanted quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but like when it comes down, you get into art related stuff and graphic design, it's like, yes, you can do it quickly. Let's say you charge $50 an hour and you do it in an hour, it's $50, but does that take into account what this is going to be used for?
Right.
Is this like, did I just create a logo and letterhead for a company that's going to be,
did you create Clippy for Windows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Did I being paid $50 an hour in 45 minutes make this thing that is going to be the face of your company? And also, if I did it in if you're paying me by the hour and I do it in 45 minutes, are you going to go, I don't know, I don't think this is it.
Right.
Like, just because I did it quickly, you know?
Yep. No, that's the whole argument about it, which I never really thought about, but it does make sense. There's no it's just hard.
That's why you gotta do. Yeah, you got to do it like Scotty. You got to quote him how many hours it's going to cost. It's like Scotty in reverse, where it's like, no, I know I can do this in an hour, but I'm going to quote you at 6.
Hello, computer, and then open Photoshop and say hello, computer, and do your mouse.
That's most of my day.
And just to further close the book on the Cy and Al and how they interact with people, Johnny, under his own initiative, decides to open a can of peaches and pears for people, and Al praises him for it, saying that was a good idea. So,
but people might be getting sick from it, or at least one guy.
That's true. Yeah, it did not sit well with Tom Nuttall, who is feeling better but looked to be in rough shape at that very moment.
Yeah, I also did want to talk about the bookending Trixie and Al stuff.
Yep.
Because in both of those scenes, they show Trixie as being more independent with what's her relationship with Al.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you have him asking if she's going to be bringing him more, if he can expect to get gold from her regularly, and she's like, no, that's not going to happen. And then at the end, after he sees her talking to Saul, he says, what is he, between now and the last time I saw you, did you make me $5 or something?
Yes. Yeah.
And she's just like, no. And then they just shut the lights off and go to bed. So there's definitely an evolution of their relationship happening, whether that's because of Al changing or whether that's because Trixie is getting a little bit better understanding of her own self-worth. I don't know.
Or possibilities that are out there. Because, you know, the Saul is now a possibility because she's clearly interested in Saul too.
Yeah.
It's that evolution. I like the opening scene just because Al's clearly nervous about the way that the annexation and the bribes are going to go, but ends it with the concern about her. He has the line about like, don't try to do yourself like that ever again, and then leaves with her suicide attempt. It's just he
asks her how her arm is though.
Yes.
Which shows that he does care.
Oh, that's what I mean. And he shows his caring by sort of threatening her not to kill herself. You know, like he can't be overly nice about it, but he has to sort of like show that he cares by being mean in a way.
Yeah.
It's an interesting relationship just because I think a lot of the romances are kind of like a little bit askew. We don't spend a lot of time with Al and Trixie, really. Like you'd almost be forgiven for not even realizing that they really have a relationship with each other, because they don't talk about it out in the open. And similarly, like the other relationship is obviously Alma and Seth, which is another sort of inversion, or at least like this like funhouse mirror of the traditional Western thing, where you would expect that relationship to be something that you're rooting for to happen, but it does not seem like a good idea to anybody or even to those characters. So it's this relationship that you're predisposed to be like, make the leap, like grab her and kiss her, you know, in that traditional Western style. But like the minute they both realize the danger of what's going on, and they're sort of like trying to figure out loopholes that will enable them to get around it. So there's weird relationships.
It's kind of like the funhouse mirror version of Wyatt Earp and Dana Delaney in Tombstone, where it's they present that as Wyatt Earp meeting the great love of his life or whatever, and you're like, he's got a wife who's in town with him, dying from a laudanum addiction.
Yep.
And he's just, but we're like, oh, they're going horse riding together. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And then the movie ends with them dancing in the snow, and it's like, what happened to his dying drug addicted wife? And in this one they played, I feel like they position it a lot more realistically, where it's like, Alma, you got the hots for this guy, but I don't know if now's the time.
Yeah. You've got things to do.
Yeah, and Seth is like, I've got a wife and a kid. I don't really care about. I mean, I care about them because I have to. You know how it is.
He's obligated. He has just like a legal obligation. But there's even like, they're trying to fight it off. She says like, I'm sure you have many competing interests on your mind, and he's like, a couple. In a more traditional romance thing would just be like, there would be some line that would not imply that he's trying to have other things to do at the same time, like that there is no competing interests for her heart or whatever. But
I think what they do actually well, again, to compare it to Tombstone, is In Tombstone, his wife's state is definitely portrayed as negative and something that he should kind of not want to deal with.
You
know?
mean her negativity towards life in general?
She's a drug addict and she's always being shitty to him.
Just laying around in her
and
bed.
it's like, yeah, of course he's going to want to go somewhere else. In this one, they position Seth's wife and kid as completely innocent. And not only that, but it's that she's a widow.
Yeah.
And he's all that they have. And so even though they do it in such a way to make it look like Seth being like, well, you know, it's an obligation, but so, you know, I can kind of, I think we could probably make this
side piece. Yeah. That word hasn't been invented yet, but
I think the audience, at least how I viewed it, was, okay, yeah, he's not doing something that's terribly altruistic here. It's not like he's listening to his heart for the greater universe of love kind of thing. It's like, this is questionable.
Yep. He's fits his character, right? He's a man who on his face claims to care about the right and wrong of things, but is actually ruled by his passions. So.
I'm sure he definitely married his brother's wife because he thought it was the right thing, quote unquote, the right thing to do.
Yeah. Do you remember who the wife is?
I don't know.
Anna Gunn.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. Martha Bullock. So, yeah.
That's funny because I would believe that she could take him in a fight.
Yeah, they don't need a horse when they come to town. She's carrying everything. No, yeah, they come. I mean, she's right around the corner because the season's almost over. So she's in season 2. That's it, I guess. So we've talked about everybody. We talked about Joanie. We talked about and Eddie. We did talk about them. Jane, Johnny Burns, Seth, and Trixie. I think so.
Isn't it so kind of refreshing to have a show where we could have spent an hour probably talking about any 2 characters in this show.
Yeah.
Everybody has so much stuff to do, and it all feels so vital.
Yeah.
Compared to basically every other fucking thing we watch. Where it's like, should we talk about Harry Kim for 10? No, probably not. Tom Paris isn't even in this episode. Yeah. What's going on? Let's talk about the altruism of the Neelix and Kess relationship for 45 minutes.
Yeah. No, it is so strange, isn't it? Yeah, we do a lot of the stuff, the other podcasts that we do talk about. It's funny because it's also, I at least feel the way that it's like, it's hard to bring the Star Trek podcast tone to this show because there are funny moments, but there's nothing to like make fun of in the show, really.
Right.
You know, so it's like there's I can laugh at the jokes of the show, but the show itself does not make stupid decisions that I think are funny and like you can laugh at with them. So it's just been interesting, like a behind the scenes look is like it's a very different show to talk about than the Star Treks and the Picards and everything else that we watch usually. So
the fictionalized version of Rick Berman we've created would fit right in on the show, though, which is fun.
That's true. Times were different back then, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. We can go out with a sort of power. So this is episode 9. So we're almost done with the first season. There's only a couple episodes left. Did you have any quick character power rankings at this point, or bottom 3, top 3?
I think Al's got to be at the top.
Yeah. I'd put Farnham and Charlie Utter, I think, at the top.
Yeah, those are pretty solid. Strangely enough, I feel like Cy is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. He doesn't have to modulate a lot. You know, it's not a nuanced performance. Really.
And he also doesn't really have that much to do, frankly.
He's not interested in doing stuff.
Yeah. When they use him, I feel like they use him very effectively, but ultimately all he's really done for the duration of the time he's been on the show is just sort of hang out at his saloon and be shitty to people.
Well, they have that great line with when the town meeting is called and Cy sidles up next to Swearengen, and Swearengen talks about how he talked to Claggett earlier in the day, And Cy just sort of takes him aside or like turns his head and just he sort of gives him like this like bullshit praise about like, oh, I'm glad you talked to that guy, but if you need any backup next time, just like ask me. I'll be right there with you. And Al gives him kind of like a raised eyebrow, like, what the fuck are you talking about? But that's what Cy is. Cy is not actually interested in doing anything, and so the performance results in him. He's not one note, but he's not a character who can be put into it. He's the opposite of Charlie Utter. You can't put him into scenes with different characters because he has no alternate reactions to people.
And he's not really... He doesn't really have any schemes, you know? Like this,
just wants money.
For a show that's full of subtext and full of characters who have very clear distinctions between what they're saying and what they actually want.
Yeah,
I feel like Cy's pretty straightforward for the most part. Like he doesn't really want much outside of. I mean, he kind of sums it up in this episode, right? When that speech that he has with I think it's to Joanie, where he says, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're just selling sex and making money off of it.
The percentages being what they are will make our money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean so I guess you could argue Cy's drive is to not be abandoned as a character. Like his psychological thing is that he doesn't want anyone to abandon him and he has to control everything, but his plotting itself is not the stuff of narrative, really. It's just make money by playing cheating at cards and playing loaded dice and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'd put the Doctor pretty high.
Yep. I like Cochran too. His one tear when he's talking to Jane, that always makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like if you got Brett Dourif in that character into the room with anyone who is any sort of like alcoholic or drug addict, I feel like he could snap you out of it just by the how earnest he is about what he's saying to you.
Yeah.
It feels so deeply pulled from inside of him when he's like, I wish that you just stop drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually kind of feel like Seth is pretty low on the list.
Yeah, I would put Joanie at the bottom for me.
Yeah.
And then you know, like at this point, this is where you start having to cut like all stars, really. So like Saul is not someone that's particularly vital yet, I don't think.
Right. Yeah. I was just thinking that. Yeah.
So it's like you're in a position like that where there's nothing really wrong with the character, but I just haven't seen enough to really want to keep them in. And after that, I don't know who. You know, like Eddie Sawyer, but I wouldn't even really consider him a major character or anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of these guys that are just like bench players that are fine, but
come in, hit a three off the bench, and then get out of there. Yeah,
yeah, just come in, play some defense while the first line needs to take a breather. I did really love when Al comes over to tell them about the meeting. On his way out, he stops and he's like, "You guys did a really nice job here."
I like the other one in the Bella Union. He steals their coffee and then doesn't like it when he leaves and throws it away. Yeah. Too fancy for him. Yeah, he's bonded with Seth and Saul. I think he even insults Saul's Judaism, and they just laugh about it by the end of it. After centuries of inbreeding has allowed you to see the right and wrong of things, or whatever he says. All right, that's it. No other sons or daughters. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the show today. The next episode is Mr. Wu. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go to patreon.com/The File and support us there. Extra bucks gives you extra content at patreon.com/The File. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we close out this episode of Something Pretty?
If you want to, also on Patreon, you can follow Amanda and me from the Rotten Horror Picture Show as we cover Video Nasties, the nastiest horror movies of the 1980s. We're doing 12 of them, one a month. January was Dario Argento's Tenebrae.
Oh.
February was Possession.
Mm-hmm.
March is Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, as it's sometimes known. It's also known as Flesh for Frankenstein. And that one's going to be fun because it's not available to stream anywhere.
Yeah.
But the company Vinegar Syndrome put out a Blu-ray of it, like a 4K Blu-ray set that comes with, apparently that movie was released in 3D.
Okay.
So we're going to be watching it in 3D.
Good.
And it's pretty fun. It has the more modern 3D, but it also has a blue and red version of the 3D, and it comes with blue and red 3D glasses. I watched maybe 5 minutes in blue and red, and I almost had an aneurysm. So I don't think we're going to watch the whole movie like that. But the other more modern version, we're gonna watch it that way in 3D.
Cool. Sounds good. Patreon.com/The Penske File. So before this episode of Something Pretty ends, I thought I wanted to just mention the one last joke that makes me laugh, which is that during the town meeting when Tom Nuttall comes in, he's like, Al, weren't you going to invite me? And he's like, yeah, you sit down. He's, don't kill me by 1,000 paper cuts. Don't subject me to water torture. He says, take a seat, Tom, and throw out whatever fucking book you've been reading onto the yellow peril. They're very good. He's clearly been prepping his quotes that he wants to bring into things. Throw out whatever book you've been reading. Thanks to everybody for listening. We'll be back with Mr. Wu in the next episode. See ya.
If I'm excluded, say so, Al. Don't leave me to die the death of 1,000 cuts.
Sit down, Tom.
Don't subject me to death by water torture.
Take a seat, Tom, and toss whatever book you've been reading on the fucking yellow peril, huh?